The night my son told me I could either start paying rent or find somewhere else to live, I didn't say a word. I just nodded, folded my napkin, and set it on the table next to my half-eaten dinner. He looked at me like he was waiting for a fight. He didn't get one. That was a Tuesday in late October. The leaves outside the kitchen window had gone orange and brown, the kind of color that looks beautiful until you realize everything is dying. I remember thinking that was a little on the nose. Let me back up. My wife, Susan, passed away 18 months before all of this started. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. That's the thing about that particular disease. It doesn't give you time to prepare. One day we were talking about finally taking that trip to Portugal we'd been putting off for 20 years, and then we weren't talking about anything at all. Susan and I had lived in the same house in Dayton, Ohio for 31 years. A 4-bedroom colonial on Elmhurst Drive, with a detached garage and a backyard big enough that we used to joke we needed a riding mower just to feel American. I'd taught high school history there for 26 years. Not glamorous work, not high-paying, but I was good at it and I knew it, and there's a certain dignity in that. After Susan died, the house got very quiet in a way I hadn't expected. Not peaceful quiet, the other kind. My son, Connor, called me about 2 months after the funeral. He and his wife, Ashley, had been living in Columbus, about an hour and a half away, in a house they'd bought 3 years earlier when Ashley's marketing job started bringing in real money. They had a daughter, my granddaughter Lily, who had just turned 4. Connor worked in IT project management, remote, which meant he was technically always home and technically never present. The call went something like this. Dad, we've been talking, and we think it would make sense for you to come stay with us for a while. You shouldn't be alone in that house. Lily misses you. There's plenty of room. I want to be honest about something. I was lonely. Not the kind of lonely you can fix with a phone call or a long weekend. The kind that gets into the walls of a house and stays there. I'd walk into the kitchen in the morning and set 2 mugs out before I remembered. That kind of lonely. So I said yes. I listed the house in February, sold it in 11 days. The market was still running hot then, and walked away with a little over $240,000 after fees. I put it in a high-yield savings account, didn't touch it, and drove my pickup to Columbus with a U-Haul trailer full of the things I'd kept and a storage unit back in Dayton with the rest. Connor and Ashley's house was a newer build in a suburb called Westerville. 4 bedrooms, open floor plan, the kind of place where everything matches because someone picked it all out at once from a showroom. My room was upstairs, at the end of the hall, next to the laundry room. There was a good window facing east, and the closet was large enough, and I told myself it was fine. It was fine. The first 2 weeks, I'll be honest, were actually good. I'd make breakfast in the mornings, eggs, toast, sometimes bacon. And Lily would come padding downstairs in her pajamas and climb into the chair next to mine, and we'd eat together while the house was still quiet. She called me Pop, which was what I'd asked her to call me, and she said it like it meant something, which I suppose it did. Ashley worked from home 3 days a week, and went into the office in downtown Columbus the other 2. Connor was always at his desk by 8 and usually stayed there until 6 or 7, emerging occasionally to refill his coffee and disappear again. I understood this. Work is work. What I didn't fully understand at first was what my presence in the house was expected to mean. It started small. Ashley mentioned once, casually, that the grocery run had slipped her mind and would I mind picking a few things up. I didn't mind. Then it became a list. A detailed list, actually, organized by aisle, which told me this hadn't been spontaneous. Then it became an expectation. Week 4, I was doing the grocery shopping every week, without being asked, because not doing it felt like failing some unspoken test I hadn't agreed to take. Dinner followed a similar path. I like to cook. Susan always said I was a better cook than I gave myself credit for, and she wasn't wrong. I'd made a pot roast one Sunday just because I wanted to, and Connor said, "Man, Dad, we should have you cook like this every night," laughing, and I laughed too, and that was the last Sunday I didn't cook dinner. I want to be clear about something before I continue. I didn't mind cooking. I didn't mind grocery shopping. What I minded, what I came to mind deeply, was the way it stopped being something I chose to do, and became something that was simply assumed. There's a difference between helping your family and being the help. It took me longer than it should have to understand that I had crossed that line without anyone announcing it. By the time spring came around, my days had a shape to them that I hadn't chosen. I was up at 6:30. Lily needed to be at preschool by 8. Connor and Ashley were, somehow, always just slightly too busy to do the morning drop-off. I'd come home from the school run and start a load of laundry, their laundry, because mine had been absorbed into theirs without any conversation about it, and then make lunch for Connor, because he never seemed to remember to eat, unless someone put something in front of him. And then I'd pick up Lily at noon on the days preschool ran short, and take her to the park or to the library, or just sit with her in the backyard while she narrated elaborate scenarios involving her plastic animals. I want to be careful not to make Lily sound like a burden. She wasn't. She was the best part. But I was 61 years old. I had a master's degree in American history. I had spent more than a quarter century shaping how young people thought about the world, and somewhere between February and May, I had become, without any ceremony or discussion, a live-in housekeeper and childcare provider who also happened to cook. The thing that finally crystallized it for me was the dinner party. Ashley's colleague, a woman named Priya, was coming over on a Saturday with her husband, along with another couple from Ashley's work, 6 adults plus Lily. Ashley told me about it on a Wednesday. She described the menu: salmon, asparagus, roasted potatoes, a salad, some kind of fancy dessert she'd seen online. And as she described it, I realized she was telling me what to make, not what she was planning to make. I spent most of Friday afternoon at Whole Foods. I marinated the salmon overnight. I made the dessert from scratch, a lemon tart, which I'd never attempted before, but which turned out well. Saturday, I was in the kitchen by 3 o'clock. At 5:30, as I was finishing the potatoes, Ashley came downstairs in a dress I'd never seen before, and her hair done, and she looked nice and she said, "Oh, it smells amazing in here, thank you so much." And I said, "Of course." And she said, "Oh, and this is the part I've thought about many times since." She said, "Actually, we're going to do this one as kind of an intimate thing with just the 6 of us. You don't mind eating upstairs tonight, do you?" I looked at her for a moment. I had spent 2 days preparing that meal. I said, "No, of course not. I'll fix myself a plate." She said, "Great," and went to answer the door. I made myself a plate of the food I had cooked and carried it upstairs and ate it alone at the small desk in my room, listening to the sound of conversation and laughter drifting up through the floor. Priya, I heard, loved the salmon. Someone complimented the lemon tart. Ashley said, "Oh, I found the recipe online." I sat with that for a long time. I didn't say anything that night or the next day. I'm not a man who leads with confrontation. Susan used to say I process things the way a river moves, slow and eventually, which she meant as a compliment, though I understood it had limits. What I did was start paying attention in a way I hadn't been. I began noticing the small things I'd been excusing as normal. The way Connor would walk past a full dishwasher without opening it. The way Ashley would leave a note on the counter. Not a question, a note. Saying things like the guest bathroom needs cleaning before Thursday. The way my name had quietly disappeared from family decisions. When they were looking at new furniture for the living room, they showed me the options the same way you might show a contractor. Not to get my input, but to manage my reaction. And then there was the laundry incident. I came back from picking Lily up from school one afternoon in June to find a large pile of clothes. Connor's mostly, with a few of Ashley's things, stacked outside my bedroom door. Not in the laundry room, outside my door, like a delivery. Like a request that was so obvious it didn't require asking. I stood there in the hallway for a while, Lily's hand in mine, and she looked up at me and said, "What's that, Pop?" I said, "That's laundry, sweetheart." She said, "Oh," and went to her room. I left the pile where it was. I stepped over it. I let it sit there for 3 days. Connor didn't say anything. On the 4th day, it was gone, and I never found out where it went, and we never talked about it. That's when I started making my plan. I want to be honest about the planning, because I think it matters. I wasn't angry in a hot, immediate way. What I felt was something quieter, and in some ways harder. The gradual recognition that I had made myself small in a situation where I should have taken up space, and that no one around me was going to notice or correct that unless I did something about it. I called my friend Ray in mid-June. Ray and I had taught at the same school for 15 years before he retired and moved to Scottsdale, Arizona, with his wife Donna. They'd been after me to visit for 2 years, and I'd kept putting it off, because that's what I do. I called him on a Tuesday evening, from my room, and I told him everything. He was quiet for a while, and then he said, "Hank, why are you still there?" I didn't have a good answer. What I did have was $240,000 in a savings account, no mortgage, no debt, and a pension from the Dayton City School District that covered my basic expenses more than adequately. I was not, as it turned out, in any way dependent on my son and daughter-in-law. I had simply been acting as though I was, for reasons I'm still sorting out, grief, probably, and loneliness, and the old human need to feel necessary to the people you love. Ray told me about a 55 and older apartment community in Scottsdale called Desert Ridge Commons. He'd driven past it 100 times. He said it was well maintained, had a pool, organized activities, and was about 4 miles from his house. He said, "I'm serious, they have a waiting list, but it moves fast. Do you want me to make a call?" I said yes. I want to describe the next 6 weeks accurately, because I think the details matter. I said nothing to Connor or Ashley about any of this. I went to the grocery store. I cooked dinner. I picked Lily up from school. I folded laundry that was placed in front of my door twice more during that period. The second time with a post-it note on top that said, "Paul's do these tonight if possible," with a small smiley face. I did them. I didn't say anything. What I was doing, on my laptop in my room in the evenings, was getting my life organized. I got on the waiting list at Desert Ridge Commons in early July, and by late August I had an available unit. A 1-bedroom on the second floor with a balcony facing west toward the mountains. I paid the deposit and signed the lease remotely. I arranged to have my things moved from the storage unit in Dayton and shipped out. I called my doctor in Dayton to transfer my records to a new physician in Scottsdale. I updated my address with Social Security, my bank, my pension administrator. I called my insurance broker. I did all of this quietly in the evenings, while the sound of the television drifted up from downstairs. On a Saturday in early September, I told Connor I was going out to run some errands. I drove to a storage place near Westerville and picked up the last few boxes I'd kept close. Books, some kitchen things of my own, Susan's photos, and I loaded them into the bed of my truck. I'd already arranged for a shipping company to come to the house while Connor was at his desk and Ashley was at the office on Monday. Sunday evening, I made dinner, pot roast, because that's where it started. I set the table properly. Connor ate and said, "Good as always, Dad," barely looking up from his phone. Ashley thanked me. Lily sat next to me and told me that her friend at preschool had a dog named Biscuit, and did I think we could ever get a dog? And I said, I think you should ask your mom and dad about that." After dinner, I did the dishes. I wiped down the counters. I went upstairs and finished the last of my packing, 1 large suitcase and 2 duffels, which I set by the closet door. Monday morning, I was up before anyone else. I made coffee. I wrote a letter to Connor, handwritten, 3 pages, and I set it on the kitchen table under the pepper shaker so it wouldn't slide. In the letter I explained my decision, clearly and without anger. I told him I loved him. I told him I had loved being near Lily, and that I intended to stay part of her life. I told him that I hadn't felt like a father in his home so much as a convenience, and that I didn't think that was entirely his fault or entirely mine, but that it was true, and I was too old to keep pretending it wasn't. I told him about Desert Ridge Commons and gave him the address and phone number. I told him the shipping company would be coming between 10 and noon for a few boxes in my room, and that I'd already cleared it with Ashley's assistant, which I had. I took my coffee out to the back porch and sat with it for a while. The morning was still cool. The neighbor's dog was barking at something in the distance, the way dogs do at 6 a.m. when no one has asked them to. I thought about Susan. I thought about the house on Elmhurst Drive. I thought about Lily and the way she said pop like it cost her something to say it because she meant it that much. Then I put my mug in the sink, picked up my keys and my suitcase and my 2 duffels, and I walked out the front door. I drove to Columbus Airport. I had a noon flight to Phoenix. I checked my bag and went through security and found a seat at my gate, and I sat there with my hands on my knees, and I felt, for the first time in longer than I could accurately name, like myself. Not happy, exactly. Not triumphant. Just located. Like I knew where I was. Ray picked me up from Sky Harbor. He'd brought Donna, and she hugged me for a long time at the arrival's curb. And then she said, "Well, it's about time." And Ray laughed, and I laughed too, and we drove to their house, and Donna made green child stew, and we sat on their back patio until well past 10, talking about nothing important, and it was the best evening I'd had in over a year. I did not check my phone that night. Tuesday morning, I had coffee on Ray's back patio and watched a roadrunner cross the yard. An actual roadrunner, which I'd never seen in real life before. And then I checked my phone. 17 missed calls from Connor. The first one at 10:47 Monday morning, which was right around when the shipping company would have shown up. The last one at 11:58 p.m. 4 voicemails. I'll summarize. The first was confused. The second was worried. The third was something close to panicked. The fourth was quieter, and in it Connor said, "Dad, I read the letter. I want to talk. Please call me back." There were also 6 texts from Ashley, which ranged in tone from, "Are you okay?" to, "I think we may have handled some things badly." I put the phone face down on the patio table and watched the desert light change for a few minutes. Then I picked it up and called my son back. The conversation was long and at some points difficult, and at other points, honestly, overdue. Connor cried, which I hadn't expected, and which I won't detail here because it belongs to him. I told him I wasn't disappearing. I told him I wasn't punishing anyone. I told him that I'd come to Scottsdale to be a person again, not to run away, and that there was a difference, and I needed him to understand that. He asked if he could bring Lily to visit. I said, "That's the first thing you've said that sounds exactly right. I've been in Scottsdale for 4 months now. My apartment is small and organized exactly the way I want it, which turns out to matter more than I expected. I have a coffee maker that I chose. I have my books on the shelf in the order I put them. I have a balcony where I sit most mornings and watch the light come up over the mountains, which is a specific and repeatable pleasure that I would recommend to anyone. I joined a history discussion group that meets on Thursday evenings at the library. There are 9 of us, mostly retired, and we argue about things that happened 200 years ago with a level of passion that would strike most people as excessive. And I find it completely nourishing. Ray and I have breakfast together on Wednesdays. Donna has decided I need more vegetables in my diet and leaves containers of things from her garden on my doorstep twice a week. I have not told her to stop. Connor came with Lily in November for a long weekend. We went to the desert botanical garden, and Lily ran ahead on every path and touched things she wasn't supposed to touch, and asked questions faster than any of us could answer them. And it was exactly right. Connor and I had one real conversation, late on the second night after Lily was asleep, sitting outside with 2 beers, and it was the most honest we'd been with each other in years, maybe ever. Ashley texted me the week after they got home. She said, "I owe you an apology." And then she wrote the apology out in full, which I hadn't expected and which I appreciated more than I told her. I've thought a lot about what I'd say to someone in the position I was in 12 months ago. Someone who sold the house because the silence got to be too much. Who said yes to something that felt like connection and turned out to be something more complicated. Here's what I'd say. The people who love you can also take you for granted. Those 2 things can be true at the same time, and neither one cancels out the other. The mistake isn't moving in with family. The mistake is disappearing into the role they need you to play, until you can't remember which one you actually are. I know who I am. I'm a retired history teacher from Dayton, Ohio. I'm a widower. I'm a grandfather who taught Lily to say the word photosynthesis when she was 4 years old, just because she could. I make a pot roast that my son says he has never been able to replicate, and I'm not going to teach him, and somehow that gives me more satisfaction than I'd like to admit. I'm not going back, but I'm not gone. I learned something about the difference the hard way, and if the learning cost me a year of cooking other people's dinners and folding laundry I didn't make dirty, then I suppose that was the tuition. It wasn't cheap, but I got something real for it. You don't have to make noise to take up space. You just have to decide quietly that you're worth it, and then go live somewhere that reminds you of that every morning in the early light before the rest of the world wakes up.